We are going to see all of these amazing people in the Substack community join us. And we want to welcome you to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. And since this episode is being recorded live, we want to welcome our guests for today, the incredible, the lovely, the talented, intelligent Dr. Heather Cox Richardson, back to the show, of course, authors of the Letters from an American Substack, professor of history at Boston College, and renowned author. So thank you so much for being back with us, Heather.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And you have to laugh at an introduction like that. I literally just dropped my phone overboard. First, you give this great, like, she can do all this stuff. It's like I literally just went, oops, and over it went. And it is still working, but now you're forewarned.
But that's what makes you human. That's what makes you human. And we love it.
That's what we're all doing. We're all just, doing the best we can, putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Hey, Senator Tester, will you introduce us?
Yeah, cell phones are pretty amazing. I threw some pants in a washing machine the other day, and Charlotte turned it on, and then she asked me where my cell phone was as she was listening to the clunk, 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 clunk.
Yeah.
And shut it down. Charlotte shut it down, I should say, and we pulled the cell phone out of my pants, and I'm talking on that cell phone right now.
Oh no, you are both. What if you both just drop out?
Yeah.
Then good luck to you. Although actually, you'll appreciate this. I bought this phone in Bozeman, Montana, because I was on the plane out there and I had a very bad fall. And I thought that, I was broken. I'd broken my ribs, but I thought the phone was fine. And I'm on the plane out there and it's just going like this, the plane. And I thought, well, maybe it's just dirty. I'll take the case off. And I took it off and it fell like confetti in my lap in the Bozeman airport. And I'm like, I guess what I'm doing here. And I know what I'm doing here in Bozeman. So this actually came from Bozeman.
You took a fall in Bozeman, though? You took a bad fall there?
No, I was in Washington. Okay. I fell in Washington. I tripped over a side. No, Chicago.
Wow.
Last year. This was last year.
I'm glad you're
fine.
Okay.
This is last year.
This is why you were,
hey, Senator.
That's when she was trying to help me get elected. It was good.
That's right.
You had a good time.
Senator, will you because we have all of our friends on here who might not know who we are. Will you introduce us, Senator Tester?
Yeah, I'm a former U.S. Senator from the great state of Montana. Spent 18 years in the U.S. Senate. Oh yeah, and my co-host is Maritza Giorgio, who absolutely is one of the finest journalists on earth, only to be surpassed by Heather Cox Richardson, who probably doesn't even classify herself as being a journalist, but that's okay. At any rate,
greatly surpassed.
Yeah, greatly surpassed. At any way. The moral of the story is that I got laid off and Maritza got laid off at about the same time. So we decided, what the hell? We'll talk to Heather Cox Richardson on this Substack. So,
which is that how it went? Of being laid off. Yes.
Yeah. Pretty close.
Talking to Heather Cox Richardson has to be like the highlight of being laid off. I gotta say, like the best thing about being laid off. So let's just get into it. I mean, we have so much to talk about. And originally I was thinking a long time ago, we should have Heather back on and talk about public lands. And oh my gosh, we have so many other things happening, taking up oxygen in the room right now. So I guess my first question is there one thing right now that is like really what you think we should all be focusing on, or that's keeping you up at night?
Well, I think everything points to the same thing, and that's that we're losing our democracy to a dictator. And which flavor of that you're looking at during any particular day is probably what keeps you up in the short term. But we're watching this march toward the destruction of our democracy. And, I was thinking today, because I still haven't decided, I sort of have decided what I'm writing about tonight, but part of you just sort of wants to say, take a look around you, people. Like we really are in it now when you have president claiming the right to be judge, jury, and executioner to people whose names we don't even know that he alleges are narco-terrorists in the Caribbean and in the Pacific. Like, that's not okay. And then you can keep on going down from that, the sorts of things that he's doing. They're all pretty alarming.
So we're what, 9 months into this? Probably close to 10 months into this. What's been the most surprising thing that you've seen?
You're probably going to appreciate this. Every day, I am shocked that the Republican senators don't stand up to defend the prerogatives of the Senate. I don't expect them to become Democrats. I don't even expect them to become independents. But the fact that they are walking away from the power that was designed by the framers of the Constitution to reside in that body so that they could check the rise of a tyrant, I am gobsmacked by it. And I just, of all the things that have happened and are happening, the fact that they have walked away from their oaths, from their morals, from their duty to the American people, and from the Constitution, I I I just can't wrap my head around it.
You know what they're, I don't know what they're saying because I haven't talked to them, but my guess is, you know what they're saying? They're saying, well, he's doing everything the way we want it to be done, so we don't have to say anything. What's your response to that?
Well, that's the road to every dictatorship, right? But anybody who knows anything about human psychology or about the different systems of government knows that once you have decided you're going to throw in your lot with a dictator for any reason at all, it is only a question of time before you too are on the menu. And I do not understand why they can't look around at all the people that he has thrown under the bus and not understand that they are going to be next. Now, what I thought, like I watched the Senate really quite closely, in part because of this, but if you remember, probably in February and early March, Senator Angus King of Maine started giving a series of speeches saying, dudes, step up to the plate here. What dudes and women? I'm sorry, I'm the one who put those words in his mouth. Um, you're destroying the Constitution. You have to do something, and all this sort of we got to rely on the Constitution stuff. And he said in one of those speeches that the reason they weren't doing something is because they expected that the courts would take care of Trump, that they could stand back and the courts would take care of it. But, I feel like a switch flipped in late August when people stopped sort of saying, oh, the courts will take care of this, and moved much closer to, oh, this is just normal partisanship, seemingly afraid to speak out against it. And I wondered to what degree that was a reflection of the recognition that because the administration has broken so many laws, they recognize that they are now complicit in that law breaking and are attached in the same
Yeah,
way that, like a mob boss drags people in, because at some point you have to protect the boss or you're the one who's going to be going down. What do you think?
I agree. I agree with that 100%. I think that is absolutely spot on. Um, uh, these guys can't have come to the realization that um, they're the problem. Anything they had, any issues they had with Donald Trump as he was going through the last 10 months, they never said anything about, whether it was their appointees to the cabinet or whether it was Signalgate or whether it was, you know, uh, calling out Canada for the 51st state and all that small stuff compared to putting troops on the ground in cities that where mayors don't want them. But I think they've come to realization, yeah, look, I'm complicit with this, so I've got to go along now. I got to tell you, it drives me crazy, and I won't even drop the F bomb here. It just drives me crazy because you know very well that in the days of Robert C. Byrd, and I don't care who the president was, he would be ripping their face off right now because of the prerogatives of the Senate and the House, the Congress. And so it's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable that I don't know how they sleep at night. I just don't know how they sleep at night. We got to hear from you. People hear from me too much, but I just want to say one thing. We're in the middle of a government shutdown. I think Schumer has made it very, very clear. If you put forth these subsidies so people's insurance rates don't go through the roof, this shutdown ends tomorrow. Yet, because Donald Trump wants this shutdown to go on because he thinks it's politically good for him when it's really bad for everybody, it continues to go on, and the Senate can't stand up. John Thune, who's the leader of the Senate, can't stand up and say, you know what? We're going to do the right thing because keeping the government open is important to my constituents in South Dakota and constituents all throughout the country. What do you think?
Well, the thing about the shutdown, and I think we should dive into that more fully, but in terms of what you were just saying, the thing about the shutdown, once again, to me, comes down to the Senate. That is, the House we know is very badly divided, and I'm obviously not talking about the Republicans and the Democrats so much as within the Democratic, I'm sorry, within the the Republican conference, as well as between the Republicans and the Democrats. So you could see the House sort of being like, okay, there's not much we can do. And one of the reasons that House Speaker Mike Johnson won't bring anything up for a vote is because he knows he'll probably lose those votes, right? From the Epstein files on even to getting through appropriations bills. He's now talking about simply using continuing resolutions to get us through the rest of 2026, which is mind-boggling. But if you think about the way that Trump came into power, promising everything to everybody, you think about the fact that he is mentally incompetent at this point and clearly being run by Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, and by Russell Vought, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. If you think about the fact that there really wasn't a plan in place except Project 2025, which only 4% of Americans who knew about liked. You recognize that when he came into office, there was a lot of power sort of sloshing around, waiting for someone to pick it up. And that's happened in our past before, of course. And in that moment, that was the moment for the Senate to pick up the power and say, we're kind of going to be a caretaker here for the fact that we got a lot of mess over here in the House and a lot of mess in the executive branch. But, we've been in these positions for a long time. We know how to make the government run. We're just going to do it over here and you guys are going to follow along. And they didn't. They all just backed off. So if you think about the shutdown now, yeah, everybody's taking orders from Donald Trump because he is trying to force down the throats of the Democrats the reality that if he says it, it happens. And on those terms, why should the Democrats back down when 78% of Americans want to see those premium tax credits extended, and they're just about to see their healthcare premiums go through the roof. I mean, this is an impasse that has no reason to have an answer. And just today we heard that Trump claims to have taken an anonymous $130 million loan or gift or something from a private entity to pay for at least some of the troops. And of course, the Anti-Deficiency Act says under no circumstance can you do that. So here we are breaking another law. And I guess maybe that was a thing that this morning that when I was reading about it today sort of said to me, wake up, people. This is no longer, he's doing a few things I don't like. He's just running the government however he wants, and he's not mentally competent, among other things.
Yeah.
On that cheery note, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
I want to relay a story that was told to me by an individual that said, and I live in a pretty MAGA friendly state, said, if Donald Trump's our dictator, I don't mind that. I think that's not a bad thing. His response to them is Donald Trump's getting up there in years. Are you going to be happy with the next one? Because once you got this one, you ain't going to get rid of the next one. And there wasn't much of a response there. But what's your thought on all that? That there's some people out there that really think that, dictatorship's probably better than democracy, and this ain't a bad deal. We kind of like what Donald Trump's doing, kicking all the brown folks out of the country. That's not all bad,
Well, that, of course, is where we've gotten after the destruction of our democracy since the 1980s. And it's been a real concern of mine for a long time. And it's not just a political issue, it's a cultural issue, it's an educational issue, and so on. But there are a lot of people who have never seen a democracy in the United States that worked for them. And so they are willing to entertain other ideas. But what my take on that always is you tell me the system of government that is more likely than a democracy to do the most good for the most people. Because any kind of authoritarian government simply doesn't do that. And on a much more personal level than that, and I think the idea of whoever comes after Trump is a very good one, because I think you can already see Vice President J.D. Vance lining up to try and solidify a Christian nationalist base for him to run the country as a theocracy. But if you think about any kind of a dictator, and you can see it in our own time, looking at somebody like Vladimir Putin, for example, or Viktor Orban in Hungary. Again, the idea that you, whoever you are going to be safe from that dictator by sucking up to him, by handing him money, by doing any of those things is belied by the fact that so many people on Russian balconies seem to have a real problem with their balance. And a lot of those people were very close to Putin at one point, and now they've all tripped and fallen out of windows.
Yeah.
So, I mean, gosh, we've talked about so many things already.
You got me on a Friday afternoon drinking my Diet Pepsi. I'm a little salty here. Not just my phone is salty.
We like it, but I'm surprised that John Tester is not going to drop an F-bomb. I mean, this might be a first for a Grounded podcast episode, but
we're early. We're early.
Maritza, I'd never fucking do that. You know that. I'd never.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's stick to the government shutdown here. Senator Brian Schatz basically has been talking about all of the things we're funding, including money for Argentina, the ballroom, which I know you're both big fans of talking about.
Can't wait to dance with you there, yeah. Senator.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can't afford or can't even talk about healthcare subsidies that are expiring. Of course, we're on day 24. This looks like it could very well become our longest government shutdown. The House still isn't working.
Let me tell you, it will be. Absolutely will be. Because Donald Trump wants the government shut down. Period. Keep going.
So we haven't even talked about Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, who still hasn't been sworn in yet on this episode. So how will this unfold? There's got to be a line, right? Or is this just going on in perpetuity?
We need an antecedent for this. How does what go on? The shutdown, the country we're in. Why is Trump doing what he's doing?
Well, how is the shutdown and all of this going to come to an end?
Well, you know what? Let's step back for a second, because you threw a bunch of stuff together there that I think is kind of important to untangle. I'm a big believer in, sort of untangling the fishing lines here. So what I think is pretty clear that we are seeing is the attempt utterly to overturn the modern American government that was put in place beginning in 1933. And with that, the programs like you're talking about, what is now the SNAP program, which actually began during the Depression under a different form in the 1930s and expanded during the 1960s and so on. Getting rid of the idea of a government that makes sure that the playing field is level for all Americans and that the people who need a basic social safety net have access to it. The government is regulated. The business is regulated so that they don't take too much. That we get infrastructure so that everybody in the country has access to the same healthcare, education, electricity, plumbing, all those sorts of infrastructure issues. That we have our civil rights protected before the law, being treated equally, and that we have the right to live in a world in which we have a rules-based international order. Now, that's the way most of us have believed the country was going to be from the 1950s onward, and that is something that Americans still want. Trump's getting rid of all that. So it's not inconsistent for him to say, we have no money for SNAP. We have to cut however many billion it was out of Medicaid. We're going to take bites out of Medicare. We're going to get rid of the National Weather Service. We're going to get rid of all these things and privatize them. We're going to go back to a system from the 1920s and before, in which the government really focused on concentrating wealth and power among a very few people with the idea that they would invest in the economy and they were the ones who really knew how to make society work. And the fact he talks so lovingly about President William McKinley. I mean, should we just drop that one right there? William McKinley, he gets it very confused, but the McKinley years were the robber baron years. And McKinley was best known not for his time as a president, although we could talk about that, but for his time in the House of Representatives when he was instrumental both in changing the rules and then in writing what became the McKinley Act, which was a very high tariff. And what happened to the McKinley Act and the high tariff that, in fact, then was funding the government from 1890 onward until about 1913 was that in 1913, when Woodrow Wilson is elected as a Democrat, even before the Congress is officially back in session, he calls them back and he says, we're going to lower the damn tariff and we're going to start having an income tax. And that is the shift that Trump identified as being the ruination of America, that all of a sudden you had to put taxes on people of means in order to fund the government. And he's trying to get rid of that. And now, of course, we know today that we have hit a new extra $1 trillion added to the national debt since August. This is now October. And the system that he's putting in place simply doesn't work. And his temper tantrum last night and today over the ad that Canada ran about Ronald Reagan saying tariffs are a bad idea, I think was in part because, by God, he wants that world back. And he is convinced that it worked and that is all we have to do is get back to it. And everybody will be, wildly happy because the rich will have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots, and they'll just take care of the rest of us, which is, of course, lovely if you're one of the people building one of the cottages in Newport, and not so great if you're one of the people working in it.
It's total bullshit, quite frankly. But it's what frustrates me or makes me wonder what the hell's going on, or I don't know how to put this. But you take the tariffs, for example, and what they've done to the ag community. You take the big, beautiful fucking bill and what they've done to rural hospitals. You take what they've done to the energy. I mean, look, we've got these data centers that are going to suck up energy. He stopped all affordable energy production in this country. Yet the people that see the same stuff that I do are sitting there going, God, he's the best president we've ever had, ever. Um, I just don't understand what the thought process is here. I don't get it. I don't understand what's appealing here. I mean, being a tough guy, maybe that's what it is, but he really isn't, because he switches modes every time he threatens somebody. The next day he's doing something different. So what is it? What is the appeal? You got to tell me, Heather.
Well, first of all, he's not a tough guy. He's not a tough guy. That guy showed up down.
Come across as a tough guy.
Yeah, but come on, if he showed up down at the docks around here, people would just push him right over. Sorry.
Yeah, you have to learn how to swim. That's right.
Well,
yes.
So obviously I don't know the answer to that. I will say that we have a long history of two things. We have a long illiberal history in the United States of groups of people who really want simply to dominate others, and they see their position in the world as being one that dominates not only people of color, about which we talk a lot, and Black Americans, but also of women. That's been, I think, key to the rise of this certain kind of MAGA mindset that men, by God, are a certain kind of man and they dominate women. And that's just a strand that runs through American history. But in terms of the loyalty of people to MAGA and to Trump, really even more than MAGA, because as you say, it really is an individual. I wonder if that is, certainly it's about Trump, but I wonder if it is more a pushback against this idea of this cultural idea that there is a group of elites out there looking down on them. And so long as you screw those elites, that's your guy. It doesn't matter if he's a rapist. It doesn't matter if he's a felon. It doesn't matter if he wears orange makeup. It doesn't matter if he doesn't know if he's a foot or horseback. He's your guy because he pisses off those people you don't like. And that's really interesting to me, because the idea of an Eastern elite, the idea of the Eastern establishment, actually goes all the way back to 1952, and that was a pretty deliberate construction on the part of the people who supported Robert Taft, the senator from Ohio, for president for the presidential nomination in the Republican Party, and got undercut by largely the delegation from Massachusetts, which was led by Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., who got Eisenhower nominated instead. And if you remember, in that convention, there were fistfights between the Taft guys and the Eisenhower guys. And after that, they kept talking about the Eastern establishment that had ruined things for everyday Americans like Taft. Taft, of course, is the son of a president, but that idea that there was this Eastern elite was one that worked its way into the Republican Party and really took off under Nixon, when Pat Buchanan, who had been a speechwriter for Barry Goldwater, Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater, was well, that too, but he was working for Nixon. We actually have a memo that you can find online in which he talks about solidifying Nixon's crumbling base, especially after Kent State in May of 1970, by convincing them that the elites hate them. And I think that's really interesting, because Buchanan, of course, came out of the Eastern Catholic establishment that really loathed the Protestants in places like Boston. That's a longstanding animosity that goes, back all the way to the 1840s. And that idea that there's this elite looking down on you became a staple among Republican rhetoric. And to this day, I find it interesting because, I travel in academic circles, and this idea that somehow there is this old-fashioned Harvard elite, when in fact most academics are, I shouldn't say most, many academics are first generation to go to college. It's a profession like any other, and I just find that one really interesting, but I think it is pretty deeply ingrained, at least among the MAGA people I know, who are like, I'm just as good as anybody else. And it's like, well, nobody's saying you're not, except Fox News Channel.
Well, and also you take this moment. I saw somebody compare it to a "let them eat cake" moment when this ballroom is being built. The demolition has started for this ballroom at the White House when we're in the middle of a government shutdown.
Yeah, well, there is that, but I actually think the ballroom destruction, I mean, sorry, the East Wing destruction is really interesting in a number of ways. First of all, it is traditionally where the women of the White House reigned. That's where the first ladies were. But there is also um, the fact that it came immediately after the No Kings rallies. And that to my eye, and I'm not a contractor, I'm not ill-versed in that though, there didn't seem to be any prep at all. It's like he just called somebody and said, "Take down the damn building." And without any plans to put anything up with, it just looked to me like a temper tantrum. And that sort of narcissistic rage of "you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt something you love," I think was a gut reaction on his part, but I also think people are really unhappy about that because it is the people's house. And it's like having a renter who decides to knock over your house. And people are, I think, legitimately unhappy about that. And
And
I
none of them.
wonder about the impulse control or lack thereof that let him do that, that's got him striking all these people in the Caribbean, that's had him just move another ship down to the Venezuela coastline, got him, putting these troops everywhere. He seems to have no impulse control at this point at all. And at some point, somebody has got to wake up and say, do we really want the nuclear codes to be in the hands of a guy who wakes up one day and says, you know what? Knock down the White House.
I think you're right. The people are upset about it, but none of those people serve in the United States Senate on the Republican side of the aisle. Not a one.
But
Well,
but
it's
but but if Biden had done it, which I
Yes.
can't, then they'd have been unhappy, right?
Oh, Chef, they'd have been going crazy. Are you kidding me? They'd have had people marching in the streets, and they should be marching in the streets, just like farmers should be marching in the streets with the shitty egg prices they got. But nothing. Crickets.
Well, it seems the messaging strategy from GOP leaders at least is, oh, the president's just trolling. The president's just making a joke. He's not serious. And then something happens, or the East Wing is demolished on a random day in October, and then they quickly defend it and then they move on. And they keep dismissing it as, oh, this is what he does. This is what he does.
Well, it is what he does. That's true.
Well, it is what he does. I was going to say they might be able to say lots of stuff isn't serious, but the loss of the East Wing was as serious as a heart attack, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Um, but here's the other thing that I think is really interesting is that if you compare this moment to the 1890s, for example, or the 1850s, what you can see a lot of things, and it'd be worth talking to the Democrats too, by the way. But the the person who's going to be a hero here, or who could be a hero here, is a Republican, not Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins, who already have shown some signs of independence, but a Republican senator, maybe a less known Republican senator, who says, "That's it, I'm done, I'm speaking up." Because that would be a sign of real belief in the power of the American people who are furious with what's going on, and in the strength to buck his own party. Because I think it would almost certainly be a him. And I just don't see anybody doing that. And I'm like, I feel like saying to them, just give me a call. I'll write your speeches. I can tell you how you would do it. And they're just cowards. I mean, I guess that's the only word we can use is cowards.
Well, Tillis was almost there on the big beautiful bill. In fact, he was there, and then it didn't continue. And I really think it's because of the primary system. And I'm not saying we don't have a good system, but Trump seems to be able to beat anybody he wants to beat. And until the folks that are on the Republican side of the aisle understand that this party is not about fiscal conservatism, it's not about family values, it's not about a strong military. All those things are gone. The Republican Party that I grew up with no longer exists, and so what they're fighting for is stuff that, you know, the president taking control of Nvidia and Intel. I mean, really, that's socialism. Bailing farmers out when you screw up the markets so bad that people are going to go broke. That's socialism,
Yeah.
and that's what Republicans stand for now. I mean, my God, it's crazy.
Well, and the idea that they've gone from advocating for a small government to a big government that is literally, as you say, taking over businesses,
Yep.
trying to correct the mistakes in the market by papering it over with payments. There's um like you say, the Republican Party has completely immolated. And I was saying to somebody, I would love to talk to a Murkowski or someone to say, what do you stand for anymore? Because I looking forward, like, tell me what your foreign policy is. Because right now, as I look at it and looking at the inroads that Trump is making into Venezuela with a pretty clear attempt at regime change, similarly to Colombia, propping up Argentina, it looks to me like what he is looking at is colonialism, an old-fashioned colonialism taking us back to the 1890s, but also a division of the world into the spheres of influence that Vladimir Putin has called for years. And it's a little hard for me to imagine that at least the old national security wing of the party will go for it. You could see why the oligarchs would go for it because Venezuela's got a lot of good oil, but sometimes I just feel like it's crazy making to watch us tear up the world since World War II. By the way, today I think is the anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. To tear all that up and say, "Oh, we've got a great idea. Let's go back to colonialism because that worked out so well."
Well, and I wonder too how many Republicans in the Senate it would take, because I know the fear is a lot to do with what happened to people like Representative Liz Cheney, right? I mean, she stood up and she wasn't. I wouldn't call her a moderate on many issues, but
Anything.
she stood up and J6 was a line in the sand. So I mean, I think that people saw that. And all of a sudden, the Cheneys are considered woke. So how many would it take to stand up? Because we hear these conversations, Senator, that they're happening behind closed doors or in the hallways of the Senate, but then that's not what they go out and say publicly.
Yeah.
That's true.
I think we
So
hear that, but I would say in terms of Liz Cheney, I think it's very interesting that she has virtually disappeared from the public eye. And I would read that because I'm a political animal. Like, this is what I do. I watch. I have no interest ever in running for anything myself. But I think she's keeping her powder dry for 2028. I
you
think the
think so?
idea that I do, and if not, maybe she's just I don't know, knitting or something, which is perfectly respectable. But I think if you look at the career of somebody like her and Adam Kinzinger, yeah, they're out of the office right now, but I would not say that their power has diminished at all. And if you look at the longer sweep of things, and you look at a moment like this where there is opportunity for people who otherwise were never going to be important to step to the fore, that would be the part of wisdom to say, I'm going to push back on this. And I keep saying, look at Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln in 1854 had one term in the House of Representatives. It was completely undistinguished. He'd gone back to be a corporate lawyer. Nobody would ever have heard of him. And he and Mary Todd would have, had a lovely life in Springfield, Illinois, with, her redecorating and him chatting with the guys down at down in his law office. And because of the political catastrophe that happened after the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, Lincoln started paying attention to what people were saying and began to articulate a new way to think about the American government. And I think we're in that moment now. I think you're seeing people doing it, but where you're not seeing it at all is on the Republican side. They're simply saying, hey, yeah, let's have a dictator. And that's really not a long-term answer.
No, it's a horrible answer. So let me, Maritza usually says this, but I'll say this. We always like to leave people with some feeling of hope that the world isn't going to go totally to hell when we get off this Substack. So what needs to happen in order, and it's
Wait,
not going to
let
happen
me
overnight.
jump in.
Go
Let me
ahead.
jump in because I want to ask this question in a certain way because I saw a sign at a No Kings protest that said, I will stop fighting. Hold on, where is it? I have it in my notes here. I will stop fighting when Heather Cox Richardson says we're fine. So, did you see that sign?
You
And
did. Someone sent it to me.
what would it take for you to say we're fine, or what does give you hope in Senator Tester's words?
Better question.
Well, wait a minute. How about you two first? What gives you hope?
Our history gives me hope.
How so?
Well, because we've survived for nearly 250 years, we shouldn't take that for granted. People have tended to step up in difficult times, and that gives me hope. But I will tell you that when I see what this guy's doing to this country, rural America, urban America, working families, small businesses, um, and I don't hear much. With the exception of the No Kings rally, which was a big deal, by the way. Millions of people show up in every state in the union and tens of thousands of places. That's a big deal. But I just don't hear people who, by the way, are going to go broke this winter in agriculture. Hospitals are going to close this winter because of the lack of support from the federal government that they've always depended upon. And I just don't hear anybody thinking that that's a big deal because, as one of the commenters said, people don't like to pay attention to the government. It's a pain in the ass. And so, but what gives me hope is our history. Our history is that we've survived. And I would hope that uh, a millionaire that claims to be a businessman who's declared bankruptcy a half a dozen times and doesn't pay his bills and cheats on his wife is not the person that people will get behind and follow us into a dictatorship.
How about you, Marissa?
Well, I have a 14-year-old son, and he came home a couple weeks ago and told me he's joining student council, and that was without any pressure from me. So that gave me a lot of hope because, as a political journalist, my mom heart exploded a little bit. But also, I hear the conversations he and his friends have about what's right and what's wrong, and they ask questions. So that gives me a lot of hope. But also, when I see people continuing to be really brave, speaking out, calling things out, continuing to write, journalists especially who continue to persevere even as our
Heather Cox
industry is
Richardson. Heather Cox
flailing and
Richardson.
dying. Yes. People like Heather Cox Richardson. And really, Heather, you said something the other day in an interview I watched where you talked about people relying on you. And even if they don't read every single thing, you're consistent and you're there and you show up. And I think it's that the people who are consistent and show up and continue to do things even when we are exhausted, even when it's hard, that gives me hope because there are people still out there saying, all right, we can't just give up. We can't just give up. We can't quit talking and we can't quit making noise about stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm going to co-sign both of those things that you say, both our history and our present. I will also say, where we are didn't come out of nowhere. Donald Trump is a product of 40 years of a certain kind of rhetoric and then a certain kind of skewing of our system and then a certain kind of um, denigration of the idea that anybody but a Republican can hold office. And he walked into that to some degree. And of course, he's turned it into a movement and made it worse than it was. But this has been a struggle that I've been fighting my whole career. And to me, it is comforting to have people who in the past wouldn't pay any attention to politics or said I was overreacting or whatever, start to say, hey, we got a real problem here. I mean, for me, my sort of we're in a really bad place here were George W. Bush's signing statements after Congress had written into an appropriations bill that there would be no more torture. And he basically said, too bad. I'm going to do whatever I think I need to do to keep Americans safe. And my head exploded. And most people were like, signing statements? That's when they give away pens, right? So for me, it's been a pretty long haul here. But as I watch people not just take to the streets, but post on social media their videos of ICE agents hurting their neighbors, or their discussion of the fact that their hospitals are closing, or that the running out of SNAP benefits means that children are going to go hungry, or complaining about the many ways in which the Department of Justice is destroying the rule of law, it really hits home that the Constitution literally begins "we the people." And in that "we the people" temporarily give our power to those we have elected to write laws under which we live. And in this moment where it is increasingly obvious that this administration does not have popular support, and it's losing that support by the day, that assertion of the power of "we the people," especially in a country as big as this, where you're seeing individuals in the streets, but you're also seeing governors like Governor Pritzker in Illinois, Gavin Newsom in California are the two that are most visible, but you see it with Josh Stein in North Carolina, Janet Mills here in Maine. You're seeing states step up to the plate to try and make sure that the people who live within them enjoy the Republican small r form of government guaranteed to them by the Constitution. I look at that and I think, gaming it out, if you were a dictator trying to take over this country, and you look at the moves that the administration is making, and they certainly seem to be part of that blueprint, and then you look at the size of the United States of America and the diversity of the United States of America and the history of the United States of America, and you think, which one am I going to bet on? I'm betting on the people.
Amen, sister. Amen.
I do have one more question for you, though, because I think this is an important one. A lot of people today are talking about this Steve Bannon interview where he just continues to double down on this idea that Donald Trump is going to be president again for a third term. So I'm wondering what you think of that, and if the 22nd Amendment is strong enough to withstand that.
Donald Trump is not okay. I mean, I'm not a doctor. Probably should have prefaced that. But have you listened to the man? I mean, he literally, people like that in your life that you know that they need care, right? And the idea that he is going to be mentally capable, aside from anything physical, but mentally capable of running for office in 2028 seems to me to be a bridge too far. But it seems to me that one of the things to watch for when you watch Pam Bondi speak, for example, or in this case, Steve Bannon, or what did somebody say the other day that was truly bonkers? And the answer was you have to stop thinking that they're actually speaking to the American people. They're speaking to an audience of one. You are so fabulous. You're going to live forever. You're going to be able to run in 2028. Nobody's trying to get rid of you. Cough, cough. Because anybody who's watching J.D. Vance knows he's not planning to be vice president forever. So I'm less worried about that in terms of 2028 than I am in terms of 2026 and 2025, and perhaps the 2028 election. I think it's pretty clear that Bannon has been on the ground in terms of figuring out ways to steal an election. And, quite openly, he said in 2020, for example, they were simply going to declare that Trump had won and then let the chips fall where they may. And now, of course, the whole idea of sending the troops into the different cities, J.B. Pritzker called that an attempt to put troops near the polls. And now what did we get today? We got an executive order saying that, in fact, the Department of Justice was going to put poll watchers into New Jersey and California, two states where on the ballot in November are issues that matter very deeply to the administration. They're going to put people next to the polls. And we know that when you put officers near the polls, you depress turnout. So I think rather than worrying about Trump running again, what you have to hear when you hear Bannon say that is, we're going to try and rig these elections, and we've got a plan for doing it. And in the past, when I've said we had a plan, We did. So I think we have to assume that the administration is working as hard as it is. We know they're already putting election deniers into key places, and now they're talking about troops and all that. I think we have to be very concerned about whether or not we are going to have free and fair elections beginning in just 2 weeks from now in these very important November elections where 52,000 races are on the ballots, and they're races that the administration does not want to lose.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that you both need to go, so we'll wrap this up with you, Heather. But we have to ask Senator Tester about his hat because we do it at the end of every episode. What are you wearing today, JT?
I'm wearing a hat that you should be wearing, Maritza.
Cowboy diner, home cooking for the good looking. That's perfect. Perfect hat for the
Absolutely.
day.
Absolutely.
All right. We want to thank everybody for jumping on the Substack Live with us and our guest, who we just adore, Heather Cox Richardson. We thank you so much for your time and this just great conversation as always.
Well, back at you. Let's do it again soon. And you know what, Senator? I'm going to send you a hat. You make sure that somebody sends me an address. I got a hat for you.
All right. All right. We like that. We like that. My daughter
I'll send
gave
it
me
to you
this
right
one.
now.
My daughter gave me this one,
Uh,
and I kind of liked
Perfect.
it. It's entirely appropriate when I wear it. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
anyway, thank you for being on, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, you two.
You bet.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.